Welcome to Inside the Investment, where we give you a look inside our communities and show you what makes them a strong investment. I'm Jessica Mortweet, Chief Marketing Officer here at Haverkamp Group, and today we're at Attivo Trail in Ankeny. Attivo Trail is a community where people can enjoy where they live. Today we have joining us Brent Haverkamp, our founder and owner. Brent, this was a concept that you had come up with, but it really came into place when you were looking for somewhere for your mom.
Yeah, it was 2019, and we had already, done all the research on what we wanted to build here. It's an active adult community, and we had started the design and construction of this project. And then my mom fell and broke her hip, and we realized that she was no longer going to be able to stay in her house, and we were going to move her out of the small town in Iowa, and we were going to move her to St. Louis. And so my sister and I spent several days touring all the different senior housing options in St. Louis. And we realized several things, and one of which is I stopped looking at senior housing as an investor, and I started looking at housing options as a son. And it was really very interesting as we went through that process, and we found a lot of projects that were really high commitment, high cost. Some of them were what we call buy-in communities, where the buy-in would be as much as several $100,000, or the monthly cost would be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month. And what we wanted to achieve here was a place that was so attractional that our parents and our grandparents would want to sell their home and they would move into it because they found the place so attractive that they would want to move out of their homes into a community like this one.
So what do you wish existed at that time, and how did that become Attivo Trail?
Yeah. We wanted a place that was low commitment, easy to move in, but it felt like a high-end resort. And, one of the things that we wanted to make it was affordable, but luxurious at the same time. We wanted it highly amenitized, but we also wanted people to feel like they had a place where they could thrive. And I think so often when we think about our parents and our grandparents, what we want for that last decade or two of life is for them to be in a place that they can thrive. And that's what I think we've achieved at Attivo Trail.
So what do you notice when you're walking around the Attivo Trail community?
Of all the properties that we've built and developed, the Attivos are my favorite ones to go visit. And, as I started to think about that, I asked the question, why is that? Why are the Attivos so much fun to visit? And there's an energy here. The thing I really like about it, it looks like a high-end resort. Mm-hmm. And really what our residents do is they want to be here. Mm-hmm. And so most of them have sold a home and made a lifestyle choice. And really what they want is the community and the activities that they find mm-hmm. here at Attivo. And I really think of all of our properties, we've done the best job of creating a community where our residents love to live. And that's, I think, my favorite thing about the Attivos.
I thought it'd be fun to share a little bit about what our residents think about living here. So here's a little bit about what they have to say.
We had lived in a neighborhood in a small town, and it was a fine place to be, but we didn't have neighbors that were our age that we could do things with. Here, we just have to step out our door, knock on a door, we go sit by the fire pit, our friends come and join us. I mean, it's just a great place to have community, is the best part of it all.
The staff is great. I think we got the best staff around, and the amenities, the stuff they let us do. I mean, they let me roast 2 hogs out in the area, out in the courtyard. I loved it. It's just a beautiful place to live.
I was so impressed with the amenities, the pool, the sauna, the whirlpool, and the outdoor kitchen and the fire pit. And the activities keep you busy, and the thing that keeps us here is the community. The people you meet are just amazing. It's hard to believe you moved here and you got all those extra things that you didn't count on.
We're here in one of our community spaces at Attivo Trail, Ankeny. This is the Attivo room in phase 2. We've invited Paul Wilkin, our Chief Operating Officer, to join us for the investment side of the conversation. Let's go ahead and get started and talk about why would someone want to invest in an Attivo?
Yeah, Jessica, I really think it starts with demographics. And we started investing in student properties in the early 90s. We then added on conventional properties in 2008. And really about 6 or 7 years ago, looking at the really growing demographics of the baby boomer generation, we said, how could we provide housing for that generation? So you have the fastest growing cohort, fastest of retirees that are coming up. They're the wealthiest generation ever. And we really started to think about, what does this generation want? And really, I think they're different than the generation before them. And this generation is looking for freedom. They're looking for community relationships, and particularly after COVID. And they're really looking for quality of housing and the amenities that they found there. And I think we've really achieved that with this property.
Yeah, I think one of the things also that we're looking at is we're trying to find a product that's different than the conventional market. The conventional market has become a bit of a commodity where everyone's competing and margins get tighter and tighter. And we said, where can we go where we can get better margins and a better product because it's different than everything else?
I think another thing that really makes this a great investment is the competition side. And we noticed when we were in the conventional multifamily markets that so often we would see a competitor pop up across the street. And really here at this active adult community, it's a new product type. It really didn't exist 20 years ago. And so in a lot of our markets, we're the only product, or there's maybe just one other competitor. Here in Des Moines, we only have one other direct competitor. It's really a low penetration rate. And one of the things we like about it is these are relatively difficult to develop and to manage. And so we really like the idea that it takes a lot of expertise, a lot of experience to build and develop these. And so we're finding that in these markets, there's not nearly as much competition as there is in a lot of our other markets.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing is, this is the Attivo here in Ankeny is our second one. We're about to build our third one, and with each one, we've also become better. We've learned what do the residents want, how can we make them more efficient, and so our first product in Waukee, we just had it appraised recently, and our IRR, our return since we built that, was over 18%. And that's our first product, and each additional one we believe gets better. It's more, like I said, it's more efficient. It has better amenities, better, just the units are designed nicer, and it's just a better place.
Yeah, and the third reason I think is just general economics. We try to get 20 to 30% premium on rents as a conventional Class A multifamily product. And the other thing that we really like about the economics is we have a really high retention rate. Our residents love to stay here, and so we have the highest retention rates of any of our properties. And so the units turn over slow, and that leads to low turn costs. In general, of all of our product types, we have a lower expense ratio as a percentage at our Attivo products than we do at all of our other products. And so we really like the long-term, what do we like the long-term?
Long-term prospects.
Yeah, yes. We really like the long-term prospects of the Attivo product.
And then what makes Attivo repeatable? So we've seen the success at Waukee, we have Ankeny in progress. What makes Attivo repeatable that we want to just keep building more of these?
What do you think, Paul?
Well, I think, there's a few different aspects. The first one is there's the same demographic everywhere, and a lot of cities have it. And so the question is when we go look at different areas where we can build, does it have the right population center? Does it have the right demographic in terms of age groups?
What I like about that is the upper Midwest has a really high percentage. Our average tenant here, our average resident is about in their early 70s. And that's a really fast growing demographic for the upper Midwest where we typically build in. And so I really like that from that perspective.
And our product is designed for the Midwest. Really, it's built so that you can have a community and not have to worry about going outside. But it has that nice courtyard in the middle, so they have the nice outside that they can enjoy. But everyone can stay inside and then go to use the common areas, the community centers, and just really builds a community. When I think through our advantage that we have in particular, we build a really nice product, but we have a very good property management team. And our property management team is led by some people who actually, their first few years came from the retail world, and they're very customer-centric instead of property-centric. They're not thinking about how do I manage a property, they're thinking about how do I take care of customers. And when it comes to this demographic and this resident, having a focus on the resident as opposed to the property really makes a difference.
Yeah, what I love about the Attivos is almost all of our other projects, I would say, are real estate centered. How do we build the best real estate? And the real estate is attractional. And certainly the real estate here is very attractional. But what I like is here it's the community, it's the residents, it's the interaction that makes the property attractional. And I just love to add that to the mix.
So we currently have 2 Attivo Trail communities, and now we're in the process of adding a third. Share a little bit about the timeline of Attivo Omaha and what that looks like.
Yeah, we're super excited about Attivo Omaha. Des Moines has been so good to us. We've built now 2 Attivos in Des Moines, super successful for us. We wanted to find a community that was like Des Moines, and we landed on Omaha. Omaha's a little bit bigger, but it shares a lot of the same demographics as what Des Moines does. It's relatively fast growing. It has a high proportion of our target demographic. It has some really nice attractional retail spaces, and we found a great site in Omaha that we're super excited about. We've really spent the last year developing and refining a property, and we think we have a great property that we're excited to get started in late spring, early summer. And yeah, we're excited about doing that. There's only one direct competitor in the Omaha market, and we really think that this product is going to be well received.
So what should investors look for in a sponsor? So obviously we're going to have this new property that investors can invest in, but let's talk first about what investors should be looking for when they're trying to pick a sponsor, and why Haverkamp?
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is track record. And you really want somebody that has done this often, and it's not their first rodeo. And I think also it's important that they've done it through multiple economic cycles. And we started investing in property in the early 90s, and we went through the Great Recession of 2008, 9, 10. And it was a difficult time, but I think we learned a lot of lessons in that time period. And so today we have a portfolio of about 5,000 units. And I think we just really have a track record that a lot of sponsors would find enviable. And so I don't know what your thoughts about that are.
And I think the other part of that is, I think a lot of sponsors today, they started out wanting to be sponsors, and they looked at, how can we go generate income from other investors? We started out as investors, and we were investors for, over 15 years before we really allowed anyone else to invest with us. And then those first few people that invested with us were, close family members, maybe a couple of close friends. And so that's kind of why our theme is, you can come invest alongside us, because we think like an investor first. Everything we build is with the assumption, like the Attivo Omaha, if there is not a single other investor that wanted to invest with us, we're still going to build it because we're going to make that investment. And so we start with the assumption of, would we invest in it? And if we won't invest in it, if we're not willing to do the entire investment ourselves, we won't do the project. And I think that's a critical part of that track record. So we're an investor ourselves, and we've been doing it for nearly 30 years.
Yeah, we would never do a project just for investors. We would only do a project if we loved it and we're willing to invest in it ourselves. The second thing I think people look for in sponsors is really operational strength and stability. And I really think that's something that is a real strength of ours. And so Dave, leads our property management side, has 100 employees. We manage 5,000 units. And this will be our third Attivo. And so we really think we can bring a lot of operational efficiency and a lot of operational strength to our products.
Yeah, we've had, obviously with 5,000 units, I think we got listed the other day as being top 30 student housing,
and nationally.
Nationally, yeah, and for a number of units, and same thing conventional, and we're fairly well balanced between student conventional, and the Attivo's side now is representing 10 to 20%, and there's not a lot of expertise or history of people doing this market and that side, and so I think just altogether, you're right. We have efficiencies built in place. We have a good understanding of renting. We're large enough to have the scale needed to be efficient in terms of marketing, and that adds to makes for better margins, right?
A third thing I think people are looking for in a sponsor is really the leadership team. What's the longevity of your leadership team? What's the strength of your leadership team? And I think about us, Paul. We started working together in 1999. We brought Zach on that leads our construction team just a few years later. A couple years after that, we brought Dave on, who now leads our property management team. And we have just a deep bench of people that have been with us for decades, really. And it's something you can lean on when you have troubles in projects.
Yeah, we have very low turnover on the leadership team. But maybe what's more important, especially as I get older, as I think about this, maybe what's more important isn't even the experience of our top level leadership team, but if you start going down, if you take that second level, where you have the Jason and the Vinnies and some of these other people who've been around for a long time, they really know what they're doing. But we go a step further yet, and we have our program that we call LITS, Leadership and Training, and we are dedicated every year to taking several of our employees and focus on training them in leadership. And so we're always looking at how do we make sure this is set up for the next generation? What happens if 1, 2, or 3 people leave? Are we set up so that we take away that risk of losing key managers by making sure that?
I always thought of ourselves as a small company. Now with 155 employees, I think we're kind of getting into that mid-size size company. But one of the things I'm super proud of is our people. And I talked about it at the Christmas party this year, and just how important they are to the success of a company. I think a fourth thing that people are looking for in a sponsor, I'm going to use a big word, but it's asymmetric risk and reward. And so it's the idea of how do you get more reward out of a property than you have risk. So as you think about the Attivos and you think about the risk-reward trade-off, what are your thoughts? How do you think about that, Paul?
Yeah, I think, first of all, right off the bat, you look at demographics growing. So the fact that the demographic that we're currently renting to is growing tells you that there should be more upside than downside.
So our hope is, our belief is that we can get more rent growth at Attivos than some of our other products simply because the demand is so great and the product is so unique. And so we believe those two things will give to outsized rent growth. So that's one thing.
And then from that same argument, protects against risk. But on the other side of some additional rewards is we believe that we've only started to tap additional revenue sources. A lot of times you'll look at apartment managers who will try to get additional revenue sources by just adding fees. And we have a demographic that needs a lot of services. And so while we focus on people who don't need care, there still are a lot of services that they would like to have. And so we believe that as the years go on, we can find add-ons or additional services that they want. And so we think there's additional revenue paths for us.
Yeah, one of the rewards too that we haven't really thought about is, we've finished our first Attivo product in 2019. And just recently, we sold a piece of that to a minority investor. And we calculated our IRR on that product since we completed it in 2019. And so we're at an 18% IRR on that product. And part of the reason for that is because these active adult properties trade at a lower cap rate or a higher valuation than conventional products. And so what the investment community is doing is they're saying, hey, I value the income of a Attivo product more highly than I value the income from a conventional product. And so I find that very interesting. Why do they do that? And so a lot of the reasons that we talked about is that the market says, hey, these are more valuable.
One of the other things we do is we don't, you can get a higher return by leveraging heavily, doing a 75, 80% LTV. And when you look at that risk reward curve, we are getting relatively high returns using 60 and 65% LTVs. And so we're at a relatively safe LTV number, which reduces that risk while still achieving very nice returns.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think the final thing is investors want to make sure it's not a one-off deal. This is our third Attivo product that we're going to build in Ankeny this summer. And our goal is to build a portfolio of these. We feel that we found the right product with the right demographics and the right economics. And we're super excited. We're looking at a couple other markets currently. Yeah. And the markets that we look at, again, they're low competition, real low penetration. And we just think the future is super bright.
And we've also started to have people reach out to us and say, how do we build an Attivo here? Yeah. In fact, from the demand perspective, not only do we have investors doing that, one of the reasons we chose Omaha was because we had people traveling to from Omaha to Des Moines to just see if maybe it's worth moving to because they liked our product so much. And and there's enough of those that we said, we need to be looking at building in Omaha.
Yeah, I got a call just a month or two ago, and his aunt lives in one of our Attivos. And he lives in a different state. And he said, hey, there's nothing like that here. And I think there'd be such a demand for it. How do I get what your product is in my hometown? And we hear that a lot.
Yeah, just a popular model that we'll continue to repeat. Thank you both for joining us here today. We will have additional information on Attivo Omaha on our website, so you can look at that and learn more about that opportunity. Thank you for watching Inside the Investment.